All right, so this is a repeat of session 5 of our Banktivity Masterclass, and it is all about investments. I'm redoing this one because the original one, there was a error on my part with the recording, and so I wanted to redo it so that we get it recorded and we can get it posted up on our website for people to watch at some other point in time. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in. So I always like to just give a little reminder and update about some housekeeping topics. And first, remember, you can always go to banktivity.com/webinars, and you can see all the previous masterclass webinars and other webinars as well that we've recorded. It's a great resource, so keep that in mind. I tried to incorporate people's questions into today's material. So that's, if you're wondering how I develop it, that is one critical part of it. And then as I've done with most of my other classes, I'm going to present, and then at the end, I'm going to take questions. And I would appreciate it if when it comes to that question time, if you could keep the comments to be actual questions, really, instead of comments, just because there's a lot of stuff to wade through, and you know, the less I have to wade through, the more questions I should be able to answer. So just a couple of things to keep in mind for when we get to that question and answer session at the end. We are talking about investments today, so I always like to give this little disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. These classes are for educational purposes only. I am not making any recommendations into particular investment choices. When it comes time for you to invest, please do your own due diligence and research. And remember, investing always involves risks. You may lose money, you may gain money. So just keep that in mind. If I'm talking about a specific stock or something in today's webinar, please don't go out and be like, oh, Ian mentioned that stock, I'm gonna go buy it. All right, so here's what we're gonna be covering today. We're gonna first talk about investment tracking and sort of the special transaction types that exist in Banktivity to help with tracking your investments. We're going to then go on and talk a little bit about what's the right approach to setting up your investment accounts. And then we're going to talk a little bit about maintaining your investment accounts in Banktivity. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about securities in Banktivity, how to manage them, what they're for. And last, we're going to talk about the portfolio that is in Banktivity. So let's go on get started with investment tracking. So here is like some very basic investing theory, right? You buy something and you anticipate its value is going to go up over time. And the idea is once it goes up in value, you could sell it and you will have made some money. Very, very simple take on investing. But I bring it up because in Banktivity, you're going to use individual transactions within an account to capture the activity of what you are buying and selling. Now, if you go back to the second session we did of this masterclass, we talked about account functionality. And this is when we were really diving into all the different types of accounts in Banktivity. And one of the main distinguishing, one of the first things that distinguishes sort of the two types of accounts in Banktivity are those that support investments and those that don't support investments. And up until now, all of our master classes have really been about the ones that don't support investments, credit cards, checking accounts, and things like that. But of course, we're on to the investment session for this master class. And so now we're really going to start talking about those accounts that support investments. And so what do I mean by that? Well, an account that supports investments, it has the ability to create a whole set of transactions that can't be created in the non-investment account types. So this is where you can create transactions for buying, stocks or mutual funds or any kind of investment, selling, tracking splits, dividends, capital distributions, options, and so on and so on. This allows you to track various investments, whether those are stocks, mutual funds, bonds, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, almost anything you want, really. If you wanted to, you could track it through these methods. So let me just show you a demo right off the bat, what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to bring up the My Finances file, and I have selected a 401k account here. And first of all, I can tell that it's a 401k account type. I'm going to double click it, and you can just see up here, type, it says 401k. I could change the type, but I'm not going to. And now you're going to notice that you'll see this balance next to the account type here that is 32,000 and change. But you'll notice over here, you're only going to see a balance of 1 penny. And I point this out because when you're looking at the list of transactions here, this balance column is the cash balance of the account, whereas this balance represents any cash that you have in the account plus the value of the investments that you're using that account to track. So I'm going to create a new transaction in this account. So I'm going to hit the plus button here, and I want to walk through the various properties that you see in this transaction, what we call the transaction editor here. So you'll see in this pop-up here, this is where we can choose the transaction type. This should be familiar with, hopefully just about everyone who's used Banktivity. But what I want to point out is notice that we have a buy selected here, and you get certain fields like security, number of shares, and so on. Whereas if we were to change this to withdrawal, it changes, and you get the more, up until now, what has been the standard transaction editor, where you see payee, category, memo, tags, and so on. So I'm going to go back to a buy, because this is one of those new transaction types that is supported in an account that supports investments, and in this case, the 401k. Okay, so every transaction has a date. It has a security, right? This is where if you were buying some shares of a stock, this is where you'd put in whatever that stock is that you're going to buy. Here's where you put in the number of shares you're going to buy. Here is where you will put in the cost per share. Here's where you'd put in the commission, and then it will calculate the total expense or income for that's going to affect the cash balance of that account. Now, down here, you'll see this thing called distribution. This really indicates what's going to happen with the source or destination of the money that is a result of this transaction. So if you're buying some stock and you have distribution to cash, it's going to decrease the cash balance of that account. If you're selling some stock, you change that to a sell, you would enter in all this data here, and then if you put the distribution, left the distribution as cash, then the resulting money that you got from selling that stock would show up here as an income, and it would increase the cash balance of the account. The other option here is you could change the distribution to transfer, and that basically would creates a new line you get down here where it says category. And what you'd end up doing is instead of entering a category, you enter in an account, and that money is going to, instead of increasing or decreasing the running balance of this account, that money is going to go to whatever account you specify in this category field. Ignore that it says category. It's basically, it's essentially a bug in the app, if you will. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to run through some specific examples. So let's go through buying a stock. So I changed it to buy. I'm going to enter Apple. I'm going to enter, I'm buying, say, 10 shares at $10 a share with a $5 commission. And you will see that when I hit save, my new running balance, it dipped into the negative because I only had a penny in there and I basically bought something with money I don't have. Banktivity doesn't enforce you to keep that at zero, but it does, it does all the math for you and shows you what's going on. Again, these are just examples just to be thorough and kind of run through. Now, I do want to point out with this buy transaction, you'll note there is no place to put in a category. And that is because that money that you're getting from that stock is, the money that you're using to buy that stock is coming out of the account that you're buying it from. All right, I'm going to now go through another example. So I created a new transaction, and let's choose dividend here. And I'm going to show you how you could track a cash dividend that you receive from a stock. So again, let's say this is Apple is paying out its dividend. Here you could put in a category. So I'm going to put dividend income, and let's say that it pays out a dividend of $10. With this distribution set to cash, and I hit save, it's going to increase that running balance of the account. So we're now, instead of being negative 104, we're only negative 94. Hooray! And I also want to point out that for dividend transactions, you can put in a category here, and you could run a report at the end of the year, the end of the month, whenever you want, and you could track, oh, how much money did I get in the dividend income category? Or you could use that for budgeting and so on. A couple of basic examples. Let's do one now that slightly more complex. Actually, before I move on, I do want to show one more thing about the dividend. You'll notice that with the distribution here, there's transfer, but there's also this new option, which is reinvest. This is pretty common, where you receive a dividend from a stock, and then that money is used to immediately just buy more of that stock. And so when you choose reinvest, you get more fields down here where you can choose the number of shares that you're going to buy with the dividend, with the money that the dividend paid out. So let's say it's just one share at $10. And then I'm going to hit save. And now you'll notice that the running balance did not change at all. And that is because Apple paid out this $10, but really before it even hit your account, your brokerage firm just turned around and bought more shares of Apple. So it's not changing the cash balance. Now, it's some banks, some brokerages, I should say, they actually report a reinvested dividend as two transactions. First, it comes through as dividend cash, and that cash hits your account. And then it's another transaction that is a buy that's used to buy more shares, and it reduces the cash balance by the exact amount that it was increased from receiving the dividend. And so we have this option to mark it as a reinvest and capture everything in a single transaction, but it's the exact same as doing two separate transactions, where one is receiving cash as a dividend, and then another transaction would be turning around and immediately just buying more shares. And I bring that up because depending on how you're entering in your transactions into Banktivity, or how you're downloading them through direct access or a file that you import, your brokerage might be reporting it either as a single transaction that's a reinvest, or as two different transactions. Mathematically, and for calculating all the metrics of your investments, it's going to be the same, regardless of which way they choose. Okay, so let's go through another type, split. So let's say that Apple has a 4-for-1 split. I'm going to put Apple in here, and if you have 10 shares existing, and it's a 4-for-1 split, that means your 10 shares are turning into 40. So you get 30 more shares. And so that is how you do a split. This was a question that came in through the email, is you mark it as split, and then you put in for the shares, this field here that's called shares in, the number of shares that you are receiving so that your total number of shares is correct for the type of split that it was. Now, sometimes a company will do a reverse split, and for that, you would just reduce the number of shares that you have by the appropriate amount. So that is how you do a split. I'll save it just for fun. All right, now I'm just going to go on to a sell. And again, this time I'm going to be selling, let's say, a Vanguard bond index. And I'm actually not going to enter the number of shares. Instead, I'm just going to put the price per share, and let's just say it's $100. And I'll show you in a minute why I'm not going to enter the number of shares. You could enter it in there, but the reason why I'm running through this example is you'll see that when you're selling, you get another new option here, which is lot selection. And so you can actually choose which lots you want to sell. And so each lot represents a single purchase event in time. And so you can see for this example, it looks like I bought 200 shares in 2008 and then 400 shares on the second. And really, it says shares, in this case, it's bonds. Behind the scene, it's all the same math. And you'll notice that there's a field here of the number of shares, but you can't actually, there's nothing to do here until you change the lot selection method. And so right here, by default, we do first in, first out. But if you hit specify lots, you can say, hey, I want to sell 50 from this lot and 50 from this lot. And I'm going to hit OK, and then it fills in the total, gives you the amount of money you're going to receive from this sale, and I can hit save. And then when the app goes to run investment reports, it will do the right math of the gains or losses on those cells based on the lots that you sold. I'm going to run through another example. And this is going to be buying a bond. And so for the security here, I'm going to put this, I have a bond set up already. And so I'm going to put what I call bond 1000. And for shares here, this is going to be the number of bonds. And so I could put 10 bonds. But now the part that I really want you to pay attention to, and I'm going to show you here, is when I click on the price per share, you actually get this popover with bond specific information. And so you can put in the bond price here, and you can put in the par value. And so I haven't brushed up. I don't do a lot of trading of bonds, but you can put in 100 to represent that you're paying face value for the bonds, and then above or below that, and so on. Now, my guess is that there are some people that are saying, okay, but how do I want to know more about how do I track a specific event that happened with a bond, or what about stock options? And really, investments, they're complex, right? There's a lot of different ways that people can invest money, and a lot of different activities that can happen. And Banktivity does a really good job of tracking all those things. I don't want to spend the entire webinar going through every single possible example. So instead, I'm going to show you a really good resource. You go to help, you go to Banktivity help. Over here in the sidebar, if you go to, here it is, investments, and then you go to how-tos, you'll see that we have a huge step-by-step instructions, a huge list of step-by-step instructions of how to do a bunch of things. Like, here's how to record a gift of shares. Maybe you're going to donate some shares to a charity. Here's the example of how to choose which lots to sell. Here's recording a capital gains distribution. I'm going to scroll down some more, and you can say, oh, here's how I redeem a bond at maturity. Here's how I record a bond recall. Here's how I buy a stock option. Oh, here's how I track receiving an employee stock option. Here's selling a stock option, exercising an option, so on and so on and so on. Instead of going through every one of these, we have them outlined in our help that you can look at and to understand how to track it correctly in Banktivity. So it's a really great resource. I really hope you take advantage of it if you are, there's some things that you need to track that you aren't sure how to do it. All right, I'm going to jump back to my slides. So we just covered, sort of all the power that an investment account type unlocks, right? So when you have an investment account type, it gives you access to all these different types of transaction types. It's a lot of types there in there, but I think you understand what I mean. You get access to the buys, the sells, the splits, and dividends, and so on. Well, now I want to switch gears a little bit and say, okay, but what's the best practices, and what do I need to know about when I want to just add my investment accounts? Now I know what some of the functionalities are of an investment account. What's the right approach here? So the best thing to do is add accounts that model the accounts in your real life. So for example, if you have a teacher retirement fund, set up an account that represents that teacher retirement, sorry, not teacher retirement fund, a teacher retirement account, right? Set up an account that represents that retirement. If you have a 401k, set up an account that represents that 401k. If you have a regular brokerage, set up an account that represents that brokerage. If you have an IRA or a Roth IRA or one of the Canadian equivalents, or whatever it is in your country that you need to track, set up an account that represents the accounts that you have in your real life. So, like I said, these brokerage, TD Ameritrade, IRA, 401k. Then within each account, you're going to model the transactions that happen at that financial institution, right? So again, these are the transactions to represent the buys, the sells, the splits, the dividends, and so on. So let's talk a little bit about the specifics when you're setting up an investment account. One of the things to ask yourself when you're going to set up an investment account is, how much history is there? And we bring this up because when you set up an account that has a lot of history, Banktivity won't get it all. If you've had a retirement account for 10 years and you go to set up that in Banktivity, it's not going to be able to download 10 years worth of transactions and know exactly what happened in that account for the last 10 years. Just that data is not available to us. Now, when you're setting up, let's say, a regular account, like a checking account or something like that, it's not too big a deal, right? Banktivity will go out and maybe download the last 90 days of transactions. You also get the current balance. And so Banktivity, it does a little math for you and says, okay, well, here's your balance of your checking account as of today. And we have a history of, your transactions from the last 90 days. That's fine. But with an investment account, if you don't have all that history, you don't necessarily have a sense of how much. Banktivity doesn't know how much you paid for a stock that you might have bought 10 years ago. And if it doesn't know how much you paid for, it doesn't know how well it's performed. Has it gone up a lot? Has it gone down? And so with investment account, there's some additional issues, right? If it doesn't know the cost, the original cost of some investment, that is the cost basis, then basically Banktivity is not going to be able to calculate the gains or the losses correctly. So these are some additional challenges, and I want to talk about some of the ways to overcome them. So let's go through a little example here. Let's say that back in 2015, you opened an account and you bought 10 shares of Apple at $50 a share. Then in 2020, there was a 4-for-1 split. And now it's February 2021, and you're just starting to use Banktivity, or you're just starting to track this account in Banktivity. What do we do here? Well, let's say this is what it looks like. You set up the Vanguard, it's a Vanguard brokerage, let's say you set that up in Banktivity. Banktivity finds that you have a cash balance of $4.03. You're okay, great, that's exactly right. And it detects that you have 40 shares of Apple, and it's going to download a stock price and say, hey, and this is, it's worth, in this example, I'm saying $5,000. And so it knows a lot, but it doesn't know, really, it didn't capture that split. It doesn't know how much you paid for the initial 10 shares. And so it kind of knows where you stand now, but it doesn't have the history, right? You're missing the cost basis for these shares. So at this point, there's a decision to make. You can fix the cost basis, right? That is, tell Banktivity what it needs to know so that it can accurately calculate your gains and losses and give you an accurate picture how your investment is performing. Or you could not fix the cost basis. Now, some people I'm hoping are being like, oh, what? Don't fix the cost basis. Why would you do that? Well, for some accounts, I would argue it's okay because you'll still have an accurate picture of your net worth, right? And so really for some retirement accounts that you don't necessarily care what your gains or losses have been recently, that might be okay, where you really want to know, how much do I have in my 401k for retirement? Is it, $100,000 or $150,000 or whatever that number might be? Having to know the cost basis of every one of your purchases in there, every one of your holdings in there, might be okay. I'm not going to tell you what the right thing to do is. I'm just going through the process to help you make that decision. Now, of course, I'm going to do a demo of how to fix up that cost basis because I like accurate numbers and accurate tracking. Okay, so let me pull up the right info here. Close this window. Pull up this document here. All right, so this one's called bad cost basis. And so this represents that example I was just going through, where you set up a new account in Banktivity. It found that you had $4.03, and it found out that you had 40 shares. And so what it does behind the scenes is it makes a buy for you. It says, well, at some point you had to buy 40 shares, and it flags it as an adjustment. And that's telling the system internally, like, hey, we know 40 shares need to be here, but it's an adjustment. We don't know if it was from somebody giving you the shares, if you bought the shares, and so on. So these are the ones that don't have a cost basis. You can see that bought 40 shares at how much per share? This is zero, we don't know. So let me show you how you can fix this. If you select the account over here in the sidebar, then go to account, choose fixed cost basis, it'll pull up the your current positions in this account and show you how many shares are missing a cost basis. So in this case, it's saying, hey, 40 of your 40 shares are missing information about the cost. So I'll hit edit. All right, and now you get a chance to say where these shares came from. And so in my example, I said that we bought the shares in 2015. So I'm just putting in, June 1st, just as an example. And from those earlier slides, I did say that it was 10 shares, and each share was $50, I believe, as I said. And so now I'm going to hit next. And now it says, okay, well, now we're just missing information about 30 of the 40 shares. And that's where I realized, oh yeah, Apple had that stock split. So I'm going to hit edit, and now I'm going to say, okay, in 2020, there was a stock split which granted me 30 shares. Right, you don't get to choose the transaction type here. So we're just going to say we got 30 shares, and since it was a stock split, the cost of those shares were zero. And that would be how you would capture that split. And then you can hit next, and now it says, hey, 40 of your shares are held. That looks great. I'm going to hit done. And then Banktivity behind the scenes puts in the appropriate transactions to calculate so that you have an accurate cost basis. And you'll know in this case, we didn't say shares, but really when a company grants you we didn't say split, it says buy instead of split. And when a company grants you shares through a split, it's just like buying those shares for $0. So that's what the app puts in behind the scenes. And you'll notice the adjustment of that initial 40 shares gets removed. It makes any adjustments to the starting balance so that your final running balance still remains at $4.03, which is accurate. And now if you go to summary, you'll see that you have a cost basis for these 40 shares, and it was a total of $500. All right, jump back to my slides. Okay, now I want to just talk a little bit about maintenance and some kind of good things to remember. So in a typical workflow, if you just let the app go on autopilot when it comes to investment accounts, it's basically a recipe to end up with some inaccuracies in your data. So here's what I recommend to people is when you every day or every once a week, however often it is that you launch Banktivity and it goes out and downloads your transactions or you import your transactions, look for that new badge on the transactions, and then based on what you see, edit as appropriate. So here's an example. Let's say I downloaded a transaction. Here's a new badge, but then you'll notice it says income from unspecified security. Wait a minute, that's not good. If I'm receiving a dividend, that's what that transaction type is from, I want to know which investment that dividend came from, because that's going to help me understand how that investment has been performing. So if you go and double click that transaction, you're going to see something like this. You can see that, well, I got $3.60 as a cash dividend, but there's no security, there's no category, and so on. So how do I know, which security paid this out? So in this case, the memo, the note field shows you that it was JPM. I think it's JP Morgan Chase, I believe. If you did not see that in the note field, if you click on the little I button, that's right there, you'll get a pop over that shows you sort of the raw data that we are able to get, the raw data that came from the download. And so in this case, it's the same that's in the note field, and I can see it's JPM. And so I would enter in the security JPM. I would give it a category if I wanted to, like dividend income, and then I would save it and I'd be on my way. All right, I'm going to switch gears now and we're going to talk about securities. So securities are what you buy and sell, right? This is the stock or the mutual fund or the bond, ETFs, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, the things that you buy and sell. Now, securities you often can just sort of leave on autopilot, but you can manage them manually if you need to. So every security has a bunch of different properties that are good to know about. For example, every security has a symbol, right? So for a stock, this would be the ticker, like AAPL. They have a name, they have a type, and this is also very important because depending on the type, you'll get different behaviors in some of the calculations. So for example, there's stock, there's bonds, there's option, mutual fund, a whole bunch more. And if you are tracking a bond, it's important to put the type as bond because that unlocks the par value field for that. So that's, it's important to get those security types correct. There's also this notion of risk, which really acts as just kind of a basic categorization for the security. Every security note has a currency, and then securities also have prices, and they maintain a list of historical prices. It's not just app. It's not, the app doesn't just track what the current value is of a security. It tracks the whole. It can track the entire historical, all the historical prices as well. So let's talk about security prices. So for a lot of people and a lot of securities, they just download automatically, and again, they can be on autopilot. There are some exceptions depending on what country you're in, and then also things like bonds and options we can't get prices for. Sometimes we can pull a price from the direct access data that we download, and so sometimes the app will appear to magically put in a price for an option that you're tracking. And if you see this and you're like, hey, I thought it couldn't download prices, but it's magically appearing. That's because we pull it from direct access when it's available. Problem is it's just not always available depending on the data source that the direct access is pulling from. And of course, the security prices can be managed manually as well. So let's jump into our next demo. All right, now for this demo, I'm going to bring up my multiple currencies document here. And first, I just want to show you how do you get to this security screen? Well, there's sort of two main ways. Under settings, you can go here and click securities, or you can go up to view, go to securities, and it'll bring you to the screen just to show you I'm not cheating or lying or tricking you. Look, so if we just have this investment account selected, we'll go to view, go to securities, and there we are. All right, now here you'll see that we have a list of all the securities in this document. And this is a list of all the securities, regardless of whether you have bought or sold any of them, regardless of which account you bought or sold them in. This is the master list of all of them. To edit one, you double click. To add a new one, you click the plus button. So I'll just double click it here, and you get this sheet that comes up, and here are the properties that I talked about that you can change. And you'll notice there's also a do not fetch quotes for this security. This is if you say, hey, you know what? I just don't want you to ever try and download a price for this. You never get one anyways, because it's something that's not even traded on a stock exchange. You can just say, hey, don't try and get quotes for that. I also want to point out that down below is the graph of the prices. And this is how you can manage the prices for the security. So I guess I'll go back and choose Apple. And so this graph, anywhere you click over in here, it shows you the date and the price it has on that date. So you can see I haven't updated this document in a few days. And so I have a bunch of dates out here. You can see I selected February 12th, but there's no price. So you could add a price if you wanted to. Let's say it was 140. I have no idea what it was. That's right. And then you'll notice a new little dot shows up right there, dunk, for 140. Go back and select it on 212, 140. The most recent price that you enter or that is associated with the security, so like the most current price value it has, that will sync to iOS. And on iOS, you can also change the security price there. So if there is something that you need to track manually, you can keep that in sync, which helps keep all your keeps all the numbers the same across your devices. Now, I want to show you editing another security I have here. This is my multiple currency document. So I have this ETF that's traded in the UK. And so if I double click it, you're going to see that for this, the currency is British pound. Once a currency is set on a security, you can't change it. That's why that's not highlightable. Sorry, it's not clickable. But then you'll notice there is this checkbox here that marks whether this security is traded in pence or not. And if you're seeing some of your values inflated by, well, exactly 100%, or sorry, by a factor of 100, then you should look at this checkbox here and see if you need to mark this as traded in pence or not. And that will, the app will then do the right math when you download the prices. So since I have that checked, when we ask for this price from the server, it's really sending us down, 606. And so we're changing that and say, yeah, but that's pence. So we really want this, we want to track it in pounds because, that's what all the accounting is behind the scenes in Banktivity is. If you're in the UK, it's pounds. You don't go out and buy a loaf of bread for, 300 pence. You mark it as 3 pounds. All right, so that's what I wanted to show there. Now I'm going to jump back to my slides. Now we're going to shift gears again, and we're going to talk about the last topic in this webinar series, which is about the portfolio. Now, the portfolio is the place where you go to get an overview of your holdings. And it's like a ready-made report, if you will. It's something that exists in the sidebar of Banktivity, as you'll see just in a moment, and it's always there. And when you click it, you'll always get an overview of what your investment holdings look like. It shows key metrics like IRR, ROI, and so on. And then it also is a place where you can enter in security prices. And it's my preferred place for entering security prices because we sort of optimize it for that. Whereas that last section I was showing you in the securities, you can fully edit all your security prices there. But our intent with that screen wasn't a place for people to be, hopefully spending a lot of time. It's sort of like you can get the job done there, but it's not the best place to enter security prices, where I feel like the portfolio view, it's just a lot easier. And really, this is your sort of one-stop spot to quickly monitor your investments. The other thing about it is it also allows for some unique grouping, which I'll go into in a minute. And then from the portfolio, you can also always drill down and get more details about an investment or an account on that screen, which is really nice. So let's do a demo. Oops. Get rid of that. Close up that one. Now for this, I'm going back to the My Finances document for this demo. And I'm going to show you the portfolio. So you'll see it's right here in the sidebar. I'm going to click it. And you're going to get this again. This is that snapshot of all your holdings, right? So in this case, I mentioned that unique grouping. Right now, we're just grouped by account. So you can see in my 401k, I have 41 shares of Apple. I have 500 shares of this bond index, 235 shares of the Vanguard Total Market Index, and so on and so on. Now, you'll notice that some of these prices in this price column here are gray, and some of them are black. The gray means that the price that you're looking at is not for the current day that you're viewing. And up here is where we show you the current day that you're viewing. So right now, this is what the portfolio looks like today, which is Tuesday. But you can go back in time and say, okay, well, what did it look like on Monday? And go back, what did it look like on Friday? Oh, okay, here are the prices that I had on Friday. Notice they're all black, right? That was a trading day. Here's Thursday. Okay, yep. Here, here's all my prices, and all the metrics here in these different columns. They all change based on, what day you have selected. So you'll notice that I haven't downloaded any prices for today, and that's why these are all gray. The exception are this one that's 10 and 100, because I entered these prices when I was running through those example transactions. Remember, I had these, very basic examples where I said, hey, I'm buying a bond index for $100 per share, and I'm buying Apple, let's say, for $10 per share. And so it added those security prices behind the scenes when I was creating and editing those transactions. So here, if you want to enter in a new amount, you can. So let's just say that the app is never able to get the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index price. You could always just enter it in right here, and you'll notice that the calculation changes, and very little because I didn't increase it very much. And then you'll notice it's black because it's indicating it's the price for the day that you're looking at, which is today. All right, the other columns I mentioned, there's the shares, cost basis, right? This is the total cost that the shares that you have, for the total cost of the shares you have. You have the current market value of the shares you own, And then this column here, we have the raw gain, so like the number gain, and then also the percent gain. And so this bond index, wow, it's up, 2,943%. That's amazing. It's because I entered in 100, which just probably is not a very accurate number. And then over here, you have IRR. Now, IRR stands for internal rate of return. And it's a good metric because it takes into account the time that you've held the investment. So let's say that you bought one stock 10 years ago and it has doubled in value. So over the course of 10 years, it was able to double in value. Then you bought another stock 5 years ago, and in the last 5 years, it also doubled in value. The IRR for that stock that doubled in value in only 5 years is going to be higher than the IRR of the stock that took 10 years to double in value. So that's why IRR is a cool metric. For the gain, both of them are going to show that you had 100% gain. Hey, they doubled in value. It's 100% gain. But the IRRs are going to be different because one was able to do it much faster than the other. If you want to see more information about a security and the holdings and all the calculations that go into it, you just click on it. And so we call this the security detail report. And so here we're showing you, hey, for Apple, here's the price we have. We're going to give you a breakdown now of your Apple holding in your brokerage account. And then we have all these metrics here of your realized short and long-term gains. So I've never sold anything, so none of my realized gains are, they're all zero. Unrealized gains, oh, I have a big loss when I go to sell it because it's only trading at $10 per share, which is just not very accurate. And then we have this section here, exposure, which is how much you've invested, how much has the stock returned, and this would be in things like dividends, and then how much you still have at risk. And then here we have a breakdown of all the different transactions and sort of what they are doing for how much you've invested and how much has been returned. And then if you're ever wondering about one of these, you can just click on it and it actually jumps to that exact transaction. So here's it showing, oh yeah, back in December 6th, you bought 10 shares for $5.36. And then down here, we show you all your lots, right? So we've bought Apple over the course of, we've purchased it 6 different times. And here is the number of shares you have for each lot. And then here's the cost basis, and here's how much you will get if you were to sell it now, how much you would gain or lose. And so this is a great report to know about. Now I'll just go back to the portfolio. And I want to show you that we are grouped by account now, but you'll notice that I own some Apple in my 401k, and I own some Apple in this brokerage account. And so someone might say, well, how well has my Apple been performing across all of my brokerage accounts? I don't want all my accounts. I don't want to just see it in one account that's doing this and this account is doing that. I want to see how that stock pick has been doing across, regardless of which account it's in. So if you go to group by type, you can see that. And so now it groups, instead of by account, it has it grouped by the type of security. So we have mutual funds, stocks, and you'll see here for Apple, this is how well your 123 shares have been doing across all the accounts. And then you can also group by risk. And risk is that basic categorization of, hey, is this thing for growth? Is this for income? Or is this an inflation hedge or something else? All right. And so that is the portfolio. Whoops. It's a great place. You can you can expand these to see your data. It's your one-stop spot to go and look to see how your holdings are doing today. All right, and with that, I'm going to get my slides queued up here. And it is time to open the floor up for questions. Now, we do have a smaller group today because this is a repeat of the first take I did on this class. And so I'm hoping we'll have a little more time. All right, I'm hoping to get be able to answer a higher proportion of the attendees' questions. Just hide that. Do a little window management here. Michelle Shea says, how would you recommend, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to give out full names, sorry. Michelle, how would you recommend capturing class exchanges within mutual funds? Is it better to buy, sell transactions or move shares in and out? You know, I don't know if I know the answer to this. I guess I'm not familiar with class exchanges. You know, for something like this, my advice would be to try and mimic what happens at the brokerage firm. If you were to log into your brokerage's website, for example, look and see what are they doing to capture these class exchanges, and then try and figure out, you know, then try and model Banktivity after that. All right. Upton says, can you show us buying a cryptocurrency? Sure. So I'm going to go to, I'll go to the My Finances document, and let's go to, here's just my generic brokerage account. And so the way to set up buying the cryptocurrency is the cryptocurrency is going to be the security. Now, you know, buying it from the brokerage account isn't that realistic, because I don't know of any brokerage firms now that allow you to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. And so what you'd really probably want to do is set up a new account for the digital, you know, wallet, if you will, that you're using for buying and selling your cryptocurrencies. For example, I know Coinbase is quite popular. So if you had a Coinbase account, you would set up a new account here. And I'm going to say this isn't held at a financial institution. I'm going to make it a brokerage so that I get all the investment transaction types. And I'm going to call it Coinbase. And I'm not going to worry. I don't know if Direct Access can download transactions from Coinbase or not. So I don't think it can. So I'm going to skip all the Direct Access setup and just say, hey, it's Coinbase. I'm not going to put in any current holdings, and I'm just going to say that we have $1,000 in there to start. And so now I have my Coinbase account selected. I'm going to go to buy, and here's where I'm going to put in my Bitcoin, let's say. So when I tab off of this field or click away, sheet's going to come down and it's going to say, hey, we don't know about a security called Bitcoin. Do you want to create it? And so I do. And now this is like something you can, here's where you can put in the symbol. And I actually know that if you put in BTC USDT and you leave this just, I believe you can actually put the type as other. And then let's say you're going to buy one share for, I don't know, what is it trading at 40,000 right now? Something like that. Hit save. So now this shows, hey, I bought one share of Bitcoin. Now the reason why I put in that ticker symbol is I believe Banktivity can download the current price of Bitcoin with that symbol there. And so now if you go to portfolio, you can see in your Coinbase account that, oh yeah, see wow, it's up to 48,000 now. It downloaded the current price for us behind the scenes, and we bought one share at 40,000. It's now worth 48,000, and you know we're looking good. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Dima asks, what's the difference between transfer shares transaction to move shares and move shares in or out? That is a good question. I believe, I think behind the scenes, and I have to verify this, I believe behind the scenes, I think they're doing the exact same thing. To be honest, I'm gonna have to get back to you, Dima, because I don't think there's any difference. I'm trying to see that all the fields are the same. I know we recommend move shares in and move shares out is for when you know, like someone's gifting you some shares, you would use a move shares in. And someone, if you're getting rid of shares, you're giving away some shares, you would move shares out. If you are transferring shares from one account to another, I would use transfer shares, and this, just that transaction type will better capture what your intent was with what's going on. Tom asks, how would I enter a U.S. Treasury note in Banktivity? I have 2 within our brokerage IRA account. I'm going to direct you to that built-in help section there, where I believe we cover, you know, buying and tracking bonds. Charles, I was expecting budgeting. Where are you going to cover that? We covered that last week, Charles, and it was session 6. And so it is up on our website, banktivity.com/webinars. And so you can go there and rewatch it. All right. Find. David says, my Fidelity direct access balances are long since not correct. What should I do? You know, this is I don't know if I can answer this question with all the right details through the webinar, but I mean, ultimately, there's 2 things to fix. Okay, there is the cash balance in your account, or I said there's 2 things you should look at, and you should figure out if they need to be fixed or not fixed. So let's say that this 401k here says it's about $84,000, but when you log into your 401k website, it's showing that you have $184,000, right? And you got to figure out, well, why is Banktivity missing $100,000? So I would first check the cash balance and see if that is right or not. And if it's not right and you just want it to be right, you can go to account, adjust balance, and just say, hey, you know what? I know that the cash balance just needs to be 0, and the app will put in an adjustment transaction, and now the cash balance is 0. Then you'll say, well, I'm still off by, you know, $110,000. What's wrong? I would go to summary, and here we show you this is how many shares you have of each security, and then you're going to want to look at the website where this account is held and look to see, well, how many shares do they say you have of each one of these securities? And my guess is you're going to find something that is off, right? Instead of having 41, you're supposed to have 141 or something like that. And if you need to just say, hey, this is wrong, it's 41, it's supposed to be 141, you can go to account, this is new in 8, and just say adjust shares, and you pick the security for this account and say, hey, we see that you have 41, and you're saying, yeah, but I need to have 141 as of this date. And then the app will go behind the scenes and make an adjustment and make those shares appear. And then you could be like, oh, my account balance is right. In this case, you know, it's not that I'm just making up these numbers. But that's where I would start. And you know, you got to look to see what what you find and try and figure out, figure out where those discrepancies are. Upton says, do you have an online list for ticker symbols? I assume, Upton, that you're referring to the cryptocurrencies. And yes, if you search for, we have a whole list of support articles on our website. And we have a support article there about what ticker symbols to use for common cryptocurrencies. And we don't track them all. I shouldn't say we don't track them all. Our quote provider doesn't give us prices for all the different cryptocurrencies that are out there. Okay. Paul says, I'm setting up a new account that is a mutual fund, but also an IRA. Can I only set up one type for an account? Do I call this an IRA or a mutual fund? I would set it up as an IRA and then purchase the mutual fund within that account. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. Yeah, that's probably what I would do. All right, Jonathan says, Direct Access keeps downloading the account dividend transaction of a two-part reinvestment scenario. That is the dividend to cash and then the cash to more shares that I have modified into one Banktivity transaction. I've tried deleting that repeatedly, downloading the downloaded transaction. How can I prevent the repeated downloading of that duplicate? So I think what John is saying is his investment, however he's importing data into Banktivity, they're capturing a reinvestment dividend as two transactions. Like I said, some brokerages will do that. And they say, hey, here's the dividend, and then there's another transaction right after it that is the buy of more shares for the exact same amount. And what he's saying is in Banktivity, he changes one of those transactions and says, no, this is a reinvestment. I want to capture all that activity in a single transaction like we did right here, in this example, this dividend and reinvestment. And then he deletes the other transaction, but Direct Access keeps downloading again. I would say the best thing to do is to not track it as a single transaction. The math is the exact same, and behind the scenes, it is really what's going on. Like the brokerage firm is saying, hey, here's some cash, and then here's another transaction to go around and buy it. And so if the brokerage firm is reporting it to you that way, I wouldn't fight it, and I would track it that way in Banktivity, because in order to keep Banktivity, well, as you've discovered, Banktivity will always download transactions from Direct Access, even if you've deleted them for, I think it's like 7 days or something. At some point, it will stop. Now, if you don't like that answer, Jonathan, and you said, no, I really want to capture this as one transaction, the other thing you could do is, let's say this is your one transaction that you want to capture it, and then this was the other one that keeps downloading that you don't like. This is buying 10 shares, you're like, no, go away. You can edit this and say, hey, this is 0 shares for $0 for 0. You could zero all of that out, and now it won't affect any of the math, right, at all. It won't affect any of the calculations. And when you download transactions again with Direct Access, it'll detect that you've edited that and say, okay, we're not gonna change that back to buying 10 shares. And so the trick is, instead of deleting it, you just zero it out. I wouldn't fight it personally. I would just track it as 2 transactions. But if you have other reasons of why you really want to, that is how you could do it. John asks, can you track annuities? Banktivity is not really set up to track annuities right now. There might be some ways that you can, my guess is that there are ways you can make the system work, but that is it's really more of an like an insurance product almost, and so the app is not really optimized to track that. I think that's the most honest answer I can provide. Okay, let me find another one. Deborah asks, is there a way to see all of your investment accounts in a percent of total portfolio to easily see how balanced you are? Not of your investment accounts. There is the investment report called the investment summary. And this will show you how all of your positions are broken out based on the stock type and by the risk. And then here's how each account is performing, but we don't show a breakout of like, 50% of your investments are in the 401k and 25 are in brokerage and 25 are in Coinbase. So that's not currently a way to do that. I like that. I mean, that'd be a nice improvement. Michelle asks, still waiting for the mutual fund F2 class quotes to begin updating again. Any ETA? I don't know offhand enough about that specific situation. I'm sorry, Michelle. Getting reliable quotes legally is it's been a challenge. I'm happy with our quote provider in some ways, and in other ways, there's they've made some changes on their end where things that were working broke, and then things that weren't working have now been fixed. And so it was like, great, some customers are happy now because something is working. And then it's like, okay, but they took away this that other customers really wanted, and we do our best to try and get things back, but sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. All right. John asks, what are the historical transactions that Banktivity syncs every time a sync happens? So I know that people use the word sync sometimes to describe two different things. Sometimes they refer to it as, Banktivity syncing with their bank's website and downloading transactions. And then there's also cloud sync. And if you would tell me which one you are referring to, I can answer it, much more effectively. Cloud sync. Okay. So with cloud sync, Banktivity, when you first set up cloud sync, Banktivity it encrypts all of your data, and then it uploads and stores it on our server in a database. And then you go to your other device, and you're gonna, you pull down that data for the first time. It pulls down all that encrypted data. You enter your password and decrypts it, and then it's all stored on your local device. After that point, so kind of once you already have the initial cloud sync set up, then Banktivity only syncs changes, whether that's deleting a transaction, adding a transaction, or editing a transaction. So if you go back and you find a transaction from 10 years ago in your file that's wrong, and you change one letter in the payee or something like that, that'll sync. So it really tracks the adds, the edits, and the deletes. So yeah, if you need to zero out a bunch of your transactions because you want to, you don't, covering that example you went over with you want to track it, reinvested dividend as a single transaction, if you zero that out, that'll sync over to your other documents on your other devices. Joe asked, is CD entered as an investment? Wasn't there a CD category in previous versions? So most people would set up an account and buy the CD and track it that way. So I'm showing, I just went to Securities and I'm going through the process of pretending I'm going to add a new security, and I do see that CD is an option. So this would be like, I'm going to buy a CD and then I'm going to sell it later. There is, I believe, another way where you can just set it up as an account type, right? You can do it either way. And then it's right here, certificate of deposit is the other way. You could set up an account that's a certificate of deposit, and you would have individual transactions there to show the, the rise, the gain or loss of that CD. And then and again, in that help file, help, Banktivity help, I'll show it again. Go to investments and then go to how-tos. They have like track a certificate of deposit, CD account. And so we have those options. We have the examples there. All right. Any other questions? I think that looks like everything. Oh. Tom asked, if I haven't opened Banktivity on my phone for an extended period of time and wish to do so now, will there be any problems with sync? In other words, will the phone still sync with the most current data on my MacBook Pro? Yes, the system is very robust. Assuming that your MacBook Pro, has been syncing to the cloud, then you could, not open your phone for, 6 months and open it up, and it would tell it to sync, and it would go out and get all the changes and update itself. Yeah, and if you want to see, when the last time that your document successfully synced, we're kind of getting a little bit off topic, but we have the time. You can go to File, Subscription. Oh, this document's not set up to sync, right? Of course. Instead of sync setup right here, if you're already syncing, it'll say sync settings, and you would click that and you'll get a screen that says when the last successful sync was. All right, well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate you coming. It was fun to do this one again. And I'm gonna take a little break from the masterclass and then hopefully revisit again later in the spring and wrap up. I shouldn't say wrap up. I want to do a series of additional courses that cover some of the other big areas of the app that we haven't covered yet. For example, we haven't touched on reports. We haven't touched on goals yet. We haven't gone into, really sync. There's still a lot that I would like to cover. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good rest of your day, evening, or night, depending on which time zone you're checking in from. And I hope to see you at the next one.